Good afternoon. My name is Ashley Sindoni. I am the Family Workforce Development Coordinator at Families Together New York State. Today's webinar is titled Strategies for Recruiting Family Peer Advocates. And we are going to be hearing from Christy Ingram from Families Together New York. She is the Family and Workforce Development Coordinator here. We are very excited to have Christy here to talk to us about recruitment strategies for family peer advocates. And I will hand it over to Christy and let her introduce herself. And again, thank you so much for joining us. We are so very excited you are all here. Go ahead, Christy.
Hello, thank you for joining us. Today we're going to talk about different strategies for recruiting family peer advocates or FPAs, and I'll use those titles interchangeably. Hold on one second. There we go. So I think we're going to start with being open to new recruitment strategies. So family peer advocates are a unique population, and they finding quality candidates can take some different strategies. So we want to make sure that we find candidates who meet the FPA definition. It's essential to understand who qualifies to become an FPA, including lived experience as a parent or caregiver of a child with social, emotional, behavioral, or developmental challenges. We want to make the FPA position and agency stand out to candidates. Effective recruitment begins with strategic advertising in the community network, support groups, schools, and relevant social service agencies. We want to successfully screen applicants. So we should be assessing lived experience, alignment with the values of peer support, and also providing a brief overview of the position. We will talk about some interview strategies. So completing an interview for the FPA role needs to include living about their learned experience in a way that is appropriate and follows ADA guidelines. And also we need to ensure that they will be a good fit for your team and your program. And then we'll discuss additional strategies as well. And as Ashley said, if you guys have any questions or anything, feel free to interrupt or put it in the chat and we can answer anything as we go. So finding a quality candidate, we're looking for individuals who are parents or caregivers. We need to go where they go, when they go there, and it's typically not during your 9 to 5 hours. We also need to be flexible in how we share that we're hiring. One thing to keep in mind is that caregivers who qualify for the family peer advocate role, they may not know that the role exists or that they qualify for it. So a lot of times we will hear, oh, I didn't even know that this existed, or I didn't know that I could use my lived experience in this way to support others. So educating people on what the role is can be helpful too in finding applicants. So recruitment locations. We want to table when families are present. So many of us work in an office setting with the 9 to 5 schedule, and we want to be open to meeting people when they are at these settings to receive information from you. So listed are some locations for recruiting, and they vary a little bit from like your traditional, job recruitment, and a lot of times like it'll be at a college, things like that. You want to go outside of that scope to connect with the people who qualify for your position. You want to, a good idea is like if you are at maybe a neighborhood event or a conference, is having an activity that their children will engage in. And that gives you the opportunity to talk to the potential applicant and share some information about your agency and also about the role. So you want to consider posting flyers, and you can do that electronically now in addition to posting them physically at locations. And then I always say add a QR code. They're amazing. Somebody can, they're walking in the pediatrician's office, it catches their eye, they can really quickly take that picture with their QR code and have the information right there to follow up later. You want to consider networking within the community, partnering with local organizations, and advertising in relevant forums. Have them be your word of mouth. So you also want to consider, um, that you can sort of, instead of just recruiting, you could have a table that offers information on the services you offer and also shares about the positions that you're hiring for. And then you want to make sure to connect with diversity and inclusion initiatives to ensure a broad pool of candidates with a diverse background and experiences. So you don't want to overlook the caregivers who bring youth to your programs. They're most likely qualify for the FPA role. So you want to share with providers that you're hiring. You may need to educate them about what the role is and what the qualifications are. And a lot of times they can help identify and encourage quality candidates to apply. Actually, when I was supervising, had that happen. It was wonderful. Um, you can also put flyers within the program settings for the caregivers to see. And if you have a family advisory council or any groups that are caregiver um, made up of caregivers, like groups or anything like that, you want to make sure to take the opportunity to share there as well. So we want to make sure that we're standing out to candidates. One of the good problems to have right now is that there are more family peer roles opening up. So that also means, though, that there's a little bit more competitiveness as far as catching somebody's eye. So you want to use caregiver feedback, and we'll circle back to if you have like a family advisory council, if you have groups, you could use surveys. The caregivers that you serve are an amazing resource, and they're really talented at providing valuable feedback to make sure that you have provided all the necessary information and it's easy to read and understand, and that it will draw people's attention. So applicants need to know what your agency offers to increase the likelihood that they will apply. So share the benefits you offer, go beyond your health insurance, and just remember that when they're screening or interviewing, they're also screening and interviewing you to see if you're a good fit for them and their family. And when we're talking about caregivers with children with additional needs, some of these can be more important than like your traditional college graduate or something like that. Flex time is an amazing thing to offer, and it really helps everybody's success. So also sharing what they can gain by being an FPA. So when they get their professional credential, they can actually get college credits at Empire State College. And Empire State focuses on adult learning. So that's something that can be really motivating to somebody who maybe is getting their degree. It's a professional role and it is evidence-based. There's room to grow within the discipline, and ideally, there's room to grow in your organization. And that they're giving back to the community by offering a service that supports caregivers to be successful. So they're supporting the youth to be successful as well. A lot of times you'll hear that somebody who's applying says, when you say, why are you interested in this role? It's a lot of times because they didn't get this support and they needed it when their children were young and they want to provide it to others now. So talking about screening for FPAs, we need to screen and learn if they have the qualifications for the role and if they're ready to share it appropriately. So this is the definition that outlines what a person needs to have a family peer advocate or to be a family peer advocate credentialed. And we're all aware that it's illegal to discriminate against applicants. 1 second. Um, so in screening or interviewing, we can't directly ask a person if they're the parent, if they are a parent, or the ages of their children. So it can make it a little bit tricky to screen and make sure that somebody actually does qualify for the role. A strategy to use is by reading the definition for lived experience for the credential. You can ask them if they qualify for the credential or not and share that the credential is required in order for them to be employed as a family peer advocate at your program. So, you know, saying, lived experience relates to personal experience navigating one or more of the systems that serve children and families as a parent, biological, foster, adoptive, or a primary caregiver of a child or youth who has significant social, emotional, developmental, medical, substance use, and behavioral disabilities, which manifested itself prior to age 21. So you can say, do you fit this criteria? Often when you ask that, they're going to give you a little bit of detail about how they fit the criteria, and that can open up some more dialogue. You can use statements like, oh, can you tell me more about that? Or I'd like to hear more. Can you elaborate? So that you can get some of the information that you want to screen the applicant without crossing some of those boundaries. So as you can see, there's a broadness of the definition. And there are times when somebody might say, yes, I do fit that. And you're not quite sure if they qualify for the peer credential. So you can always reach out to the FPA credential at Families Together. And we can help sort of decipher if they meet the criteria for the credential. So does anybody have any questions or ideas as before we move on to the interview tips? Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
So I wanted to know when you offer this position to the parent,
Huh?
we submit the application to the agency that you just said will help us with the credentialing.
Yeah. So they would go through the process for credentialing with Families Together New York State.
Families together.
So say
Okay.
you hire a FPA,
Mm-hmm.
they would there's on our website there's a step-by-step process, and there's also actually a webinar on CTAC that walks you through that step-by-step process with Carrie Ann, who's the director of workforce development.
Yes, I know
So,
Carrie Ann.
oh, okay. So you would have them go to the Families Together, they create an account, and then they start with the modules. There's 14 modules in level 1.
Yeah.
So they can do those, sort of wherever it is that you have them set up online. And then there's,
Okay.
then they can apply for that provisional credential. After they apply for the provisional credential and they're approved, and they also have completed level 2 modules online, then they would sign up for our 4-day in person. So it's virtual, but it's live 4 days, and to get their professional credential. And then we also do some coaching calls.
Okay. Thank
Does
you.
that help?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Thank
Anything else?
All right, I'm also wondering with these trainings and the certification, if there is a cost associated, or if you already said that, sorry.
Oh, I didn't, and that's an amazing question. Actually, no, OMH and Families Together have waived the cost of the trainings, so everything is free to obtain.
Thank you so much. That's super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's huge. There used to be a cost, and then that was waived to just sort of be able to support peer advocates in gaining the credential and building the field. Another thing is that sometimes, if you are going through the hiring process with somebody and they're willing to, obviously you could never tell somebody that they had to, they could start, the modulars before they were actually starting work. So it's just something that they do have the option of doing. They don't have to be employed to get their provisional credential. They do have to be employed and have 1,000 hours working or volunteering as an FPA to get the professional credential. And that provisional credential is good for 18 months. So you do have time to get those hours and get all the rest of the training done. Anything else? I love questions, so I'm not just talking at you.
I do have one more thing. So after the 18 months, then you have to do another training?
So the provisional credential is good for 18 months. And during that 18 months, you would do the PEP level 2, which is another 6 online modules. And then you would sign up for our 4-day in-person training, which again is virtual, but it is live. And then you complete the 10 coaching calls. So basically what that is that we have the group that went through the 4-day training. Everybody presents a family and sort of works through the process and helps support each other in doing the actual work before they get their professional credential. So anytime within that 18 months, they can complete that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if you have somebody who maybe goes over the 18 months, maybe they did it at home, and they didn't, life happened, they didn't get hired in time, always reach out to Families Together, and we're always willing to work with people and, help support them in being successful. So very
Thank you.
rarely is there a dead end. Anything else? All right. So we are going to talk about some interview tips. One of the things that I think is so important is when you're interviewing a family peer, so somebody who's a caregiver of a child with higher or increased needs, it's important to create supportive building blocks to start a quality and positive working relationship. So a lot of times, if you can be open to off-hour interviews outside of that 9 to 5, if you are willing to offer in-person or virtual, that can really help. Um, I know a lot of people like to have it in person, but to do that initial one virtually can sometimes get the ball rolling a little bit quicker. allowing for less formal interviews for the first meeting. So maybe, they have to work during the day, they don't have a caregiver at night. And so, maybe you can meet them at their local library to do the interview, or just showing flexibility and problem solving so that they can do that interview if you think they're potentially a good candidate. Some of the things that caregivers face while they're trying to interview and likely working another job is you know finding that caregiver or those kind of things. So not overlooking somebody who might be a great candidate just because of those technicalities. And then also to show empathy for their caregiving role. Recently, I did an interview and the person's caregiver called out. They were ill. So we went ahead, it was a virtual interview, and we went ahead and did the interview, knowing that, their 2.5-year-old was there. And if she needed to take a break to, you know, um, meet that child's needs, that was okay. Because life happens and we didn't want to prolong sort of the process, because of that. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions about that, or have you done that and it's been successful? So for some sample interview questions, you want to get behind or get beyond the traditional information and help you decide if they're a good fit for their agency and for the role that you're hiring for. So you're talking about like what's your knowledge of technology, do you have a high school degree, or whatever it is your agency requires. um some of those things. I think talking about pay early on is really good to make sure everybody's sort of on the same page as far as that goes. But saying, so without going into those ADA compliance issues, right? Asking if they're a parent or if how old their children are, you can say, can you tell me some ways that you might use your personal lived experience to support the people that you'd be working with? Um, Another way to sort of frame it is by explaining the role and that they would be using their lived experience. Um, this will also tell you, like, are they ready to share their lived experience? Do they overshare their lived experience? Um, just sort of getting some of those details that'll be helpful before you hire them and they're interacting with families. Another question could be, what is your experience with the mental health system? What role has peer support had in your own journey? A lot of times you're going to hear that they didn't even know it existed, and that's why they want to do it. That was the case for me when I started many years ago. And then asking, can you give an example of your ability to advocate for others? So um, having them give you an actual example of something, you can ask, when did you advocate and it didn't go well? How did you handle that? Things along those lines will help you get into some of that lived experience and see how they share that with you. Any thoughts on that? How has screening and interviewing gone for you, and like what barriers have you met when you're doing that? Good, Maggie.
I think for me, my experience when hiring or interviewing new potential family peer advocates is like they might be aware of like what a case manager's role is already, and they might feel that that role and their role overlap like heavily, and where the line kind of like is drawn on like what's being a case manager and what's being a family peer advocate. And I do feel that they overlap in many ways.
Yeah.
But it can feel a little like intimidating or repetitive or confuse
Yes.
for oncoming staff.
I agree. And sometimes, right, those case managers, if there hasn't been a family peer, can feel like they're getting their toes stepped on, as that family peer is onboarded.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely, a challenge. They can, so during that credentialing, the modulars and then the 4-day training, they will learn more about where their role falls and where it doesn't fall. So that should help support them. And there's a ton of resources on like PeerTac and CTAC that can sort of go into some of that a little bit more in depth. But that's definitely a challenge. Just having them to know, where their lane is and if their lane overlaps, how to do that well.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Of course. Anybody else? Sorry about my cat.
Sorry, so I'm thinking on there's probably a lot of resources as we just received a grant in Nassau County, Long Island to recruit and employ family peer advocates. So we're really excited.
Awesome.
I'm just wondering that's where some of the resources about those specific responsibilities will also be, right, on families together and CTAC.
Yeah, so if you go to Families Together, it'll give you a list, like sort of the steps to get the credential, and it will link you to the CTAC where all of the modulars are. We really encourage people who aren't familiar or maybe have not had a family peer role in their organization yet, that they do maybe the level 1, just to get an idea and a better understanding of what the role entails. Reading those code of ethics and some of that other stuff is helpful too.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and don't hesitate to reach out to that FPA credential email. We would be more than happy to help you sort of navigate and make sure that it's successful. And anyone else? Awesome. Thank you for asking the questions and sharing a little bit what you guys are doing. So we are going to talk about other resources that are available. So this will help you, Elizabeth, a little bit too. There's a family peer advocate hiring toolkit, and that's on CTAC. So it goes over the FPA role, the skills and qualities for an effective FPA, the recruiting and hiring, setting the expectations and screening. So it does a deeper dive into a lot of things that I touched on. So that will definitely help. Preparing your organization would be a great one. If you are having some of that overlapping of roles, how to navigate that. Because it can be really tough, especially with care managers and FPAs. I've had that personally. And then also information on how to retain an FPA. So, as we said, an important part of hiring the family peer is to understand the credentialing pathway. So this is some of what I was referencing. To your left is what you'll see on the Families Together New York State website. And that will take you right to the applications. It can really help to even just look over the applications. For your provisional application, you need to have completed the PEP level 1 training, so those for 14 modulars. And then you need 2 references speaking to your ability to advocate for others in a professional setting or in a professional way. There's some other information in there, but those are sort of the 3 main things that you need to have. And it can take a little bit to get those reference letters. So sometimes having them sort of ask, showing them that page, there's prompts that they can give, showing that to them, having them send that out. There shouldn't be 3 reference letters for the provisional credential. There is, so for the provisional credential, they can't have their direct supervisor write a reference letter because for the professional, we require that the supervisor write a recommendation letter. So maybe that was it. Oh, okay. Yeah, and I'm talking strictly about the family peer advocate credential. That's good to know though. And then for the professional application, oh, no worries. For the professional application, you need to have those 1,000 worked hours. It can be paid or unpaid. They add up pretty quickly, especially if you're a full-time employee. You need to do the POP level 2 modulars, and then also the 4-day in training and complete those coaching calls. And then your professional application is good for 2 years. And in those 2 years, the requirement of 20 continuing ed hours are required. So it's pretty flexible actually. It's really any learning that you've done that can support you in your role as an FPA. And it's just something for organizations to keep in mind, though, that they do need time and resources to be able to get those 20 hours in the 2 years before they have to renew. And there also is no cost to renew the application or the credential either. And then on the other side is the 6 steps. And so that you can find on the Families Together website as well. And then again, on CTAC, there is, and it's fairly new, it's updated, walking you step by step and sort of giving you a little bit more information about what each step looks like. And then there's also a webinar for the family peer advocates, provisional application and professional application. So they can actually, sort of go through the webinar, watching and being talked through completing that application if they're struggling at all. And again, anybody can always email us at families at FPA credential at Families Together. So no, you don't need references when you renew. The main thing that you need is the 20 hours. A good thing to know though is that where some people stumble is that when they're renewing, they have to have proof of the hours that they're sending in. So to have them keep track as they're going along, like screenshots of, completing a webinar, a lot of times like from CTAC, it would be in your account, but also you get like a confirmation email, screenshotting and saving that, just to sort of help that process along. Because a lot of times people do have the 20 hours and the struggle is just getting sort of the confirmation that they actually did that. Any other questions or thoughts? Anything else in the chat, Ashley?
I don't think so.
I just had
No.
one question.
Oh.
If your FPA credentialing expires, are you still allowed to renew it? Or is there a
Absolutely.
certain period of time?
So again, Families Together is really focused on helping people for success. So there are policies like having something expire. The best way to sort of get through that would be to email that FPA credentials at Families Together and just tell them, you know, my credential expired, and we'll give you step by step and we'll help support you so that you can get that credential back into good standing. And then another thing to just sort of keep in mind is if you're billing Medicaid for any services, you want to make sure that they're not billing if they don't have an active credential, either a provisional or a professional. Because Medicaid will have you pay those dollars back. Nobody ever likes to do that. So for the family peer support services under the Children and Family Treatment Support Services, FTSS, that is one of the ones that's most frequently used that does require the credential in order to bill for the service. Is anybody hiring for that role in the CFTSS?
Hi, it's Michelle from Families Together in Oneonta, or Family Resource Network. Sorry, Families Together.
You could be with us.
Well, I'd love to be with you guys. I love where I am too, but I love both. So, but we are hiring. We have an open position currently. It's a struggle in our area to get applications.
Yeah, it is. And again, I think one of the biggest things, before I joined Families Together recently, I supervised at another agency. And I think one of the biggest barriers were that people just don't even know it exists. So, you know, when you're tabling or at events and stuff, to just have informational stuff like, you know, if you meet this criteria, you could have a professional, you know, career, offering these services and helping people who are going through similar things. And also I will say Families Together does have, forgive me, I don't know the exact name of it, but we do have job postings that advocates can go and look at. So, you know, feel free to send that to us and we can post your positions on there.
I keep meaning to send it. I will say, I
I
don't
feel
think
that.
in our area that it's so much that people don't know about us, because we used to get a lot of applications, but I feel like with the raises and minimum wage and stuff, we have just fallen behind on what we can pay on like keeping ahead of those minimum wage. And transportation's a huge issue in our area, and
Okay.
there's a lot of barriers to it. I think people that work for us generally like it and are happy, but it's just there's a lot of barriers.
Yeah. Yeah, transportation is a huge one.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, the minimum wage, definitely can be a challenge to, you know, stay competitive.
I don't know what other places are paying, but I don't mind sharing. Like, we're starting people at $19 an hour, $20 if they have a bachelor's degree, and we still just don't get many applications.
Wow.
I
Yeah, I
don't know
feel
what
like
other
that's
places
pretty
are paying.
competitive, from what I know.
Oh, we're trying, but it's just, there's a lot of places in the area competing for sort of the same people, not that other
Right.
people provide this service, because down in our area, we're the only one providing the service. But like Springbrook and, you know, these same people could be, you know, direct care workers or school aides and things that there's just a lot of competition for those individuals right now.
Yeah, and that's a change, right? Like, I don't feel like there was such a competition for family peer advocates.
No, there didn't used
And
to be.
now, you know, they're adding them to so many different programs and clinics and schools, which is amazing, right? But it also does mean that you have to sort of grab attention or be competitive with those other agencies to get them to apply.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Lilia Novik. I'm the team lead from Child Center of New York Youth Act team. And similarly, we've had a great challenge to get applicants that are certified. So we're based in Manhattan, so we're a Manhattan Youth Act team, and you mentioned that we can post on your website. What does that entail? Maybe I missed the information when it was provided.
I am gonna be honest, I do not know exactly what it entails. Oh, look at, thank you so much, CTAC. So you would email info@familiestogether.ftnys.org with a
Mhm.
description and the application instructions. Contact person, website link, logo if applicable. I did have a question. So are you only advertising for credentialed peers? Or are you willing to take somebody who is not credentialed yet?
So we've only been advertising for credential peers just because we feel it probably, considering the working with youth, the population we have, we would just like someone with experience and, you know,
Right. I would encourage you to maybe open that up a little bit, for applicants, because there's a lot of roles that maybe a caregiver has been in that does have that advocacy and they do have a lot of the skills, but that they didn't get that credential because they're not in an actual family peer advocate role. So I think that maybe, taking off that credential requirement and making sure that you have a thorough screening to make sure that they have the skills that you're looking for, might increase your success.
yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, because they would have to be, so
Bigger
if they're
pool.
not, I'm sorry.
I'm sure it's gonna bigger pool of candidates.
Yeah, and if they're not working as an FPA currently, then they wouldn't be able to have the professional credential. So they'd have to be coming from that role to the role with you, where
Mhm.
if they didn't have to be credentialed, and maybe it could even say like, provisionally credentialed, and you could give the information for families together so that they could sort of get that and
Mhm.
then apply. That might help too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay.
know the youth act teams are, it can be an intense program and
Yes. Yeah.
yes, the needs are high. I supervised some family peers that worked in that at one time.
Right. So that's why considering we're already dealing with parents who are challenging, so we need support. We just want to be able to know that the support we're getting is professional and,
Yes,
provides actual support versus, us supervising, training, kind of like
right.
more than necessary.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I
Yeah.
would even look at maybe considering just requiring the provisional.
Yeah, no,
Um,
that's a good suggestion. Yeah.
and then maybe they would go through those 14 hours, right? And have that at least have an understanding of the role when they're onboarding. Um, but if they're not already an FPA, you wouldn't be missing those people with qualifications. When I became an FPA, I was actually a daycare provider. I had my own daycare in my home for 20 years. And so many of the things that I was doing with the families I worked with transferred over into this role. I just didn't know it because I didn't know it existed.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this training will allow you to work only with your own relatives. Can you tell me more?
Christy, I think there was a question. It's asking if the training will allow you only to work with relatives.
So I guess I would need to know like in what context that would be. Like, you can take the trainings to learn the skills to help support relatives. If you're talking about the actual credential, um, it would sort of depend on what that looks like. So your provisional New York State peer specialist, I was wondering. Can you say more about that?
Hi, good
Hi.
afternoon. Yes, this is Farhan. I was just wondering, I am a provisional peer specialist, and I was wondering what kind of jobs opportunity I will have with that. So, since this is specifically for FPA, I was wondering if there are other opportunities which I probably do not know. I would be happy to hear more about it.
Okay, so we're talking about the Family Peer Advocacy Credential, which is different than the New York State Peer Specialist. So I'm not fully familiar with that. Like I know that it exists, but I don't really have like the details of what that qualifies you for. If you were to get your provisional application, or I'm sorry, your provisional credential for the family peer, you would qualify to work for many agencies require it to be a family peer advocate. And you'd also be qualified to bill Medicaid for the family peer service. And then I would encourage you to go to Families Together New York State, ftns.org, and look at those job postings. So that's going to give you a lot of information all across the state about who's hiring for FPAs, and it can give you an idea of maybe where to look to where you live. Thank you. I love like I say it, and then the link appears. Any other questions or thoughts?
Looks like we do have a question in the comments. It's a comment.
Yeah, so Crystal said many people don't feel they can be a good advocate for other children with disabilities if you're struggling with your own. I think we all learn from each other, and I had a great team I learned from, and I originally had a family peer before you took the role yourself. I love that. I love when people who have used the service, get to the point where they're ready to, become credentialed and provide the service. I think that you're right. A lot of people feel like if I feel some kind of way at home, how could I possibly help other people in this service? And I think sort of it's true across the board, right? With children, you do need to be in a certain place with your own family, I think, to be able to have sort of the space for offering the family peer support service and not having it overwhelm you. But also, when you're working with other families, you have a different perspective than you do with your own, and you're not quite so emotionally attached. So I think that I would encourage people to look more into the role, even if they felt like, they don't have it all together at home, because I think that, none of us are ever going to reach that likely. Um, and yeah, I love that you used the service and then became an FPA.
I just wanted to add that in our county, we see a lot of turnover. And an option that I've seen some agencies take is making their employees part-time. Um, so that it kind of gives them more flexibility, but I know that's not always possible and plausible.
Yeah. One of my favorite hour things is 30 hours. Sort of like, between that 20 and 40, and it gives people a little bit more room to breathe as far as things like that go. But I also think that flex time is huge, right? Offering that, maybe the FPA does need to work like 9 to 5 in the office setting or whatnot, but being able to flex for, doctor's appointments, sick kids, things like that. and allowing them to maybe complete, the notes or the documentation at home after their kids go to bed or something like that, can really help with the longevity of the role and decreasing burnout. And then, of course, also reminding them, self-care and using your PTO days, encouraging people to take their PTO days when you see that they're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, helps with retention. And again, on CTAC, I'm going to go back. I don't think after the two. There it is. On CTAC, there is a webinar on increasing retention too that you might find helpful. Anything else? I love having conversations, so please feel free to put in the chat or unmute. I think it's helpful. I think everybody can learn from each other, what's working, where people are struggling, that kind of stuff. Okay, so sorry, lost my place. There we go. So as we wrap up, there's some things to keep in mind. Recruiting a strong family peer advocate starts with a clear understanding of the role and the unique qualifications. Again, if you maybe aren't familiar with the role and will be supervising an advocate, we encourage you to do the PEP level 1 trainings to get a better understanding of that guidance. But then there's also other resources that you can find that don't take, quite as much time, that can help educate you so that you are ready to, screen and interview and onboard a family peer for your program. Effective recruitment strategies involve thoughtful outreach and targeted advertising and creating deep connections within the community. So we, we want to be connected with our community. We want to be educating people about this role. And again, you can, be educating about this role and that you're hiring while also educating about the services you offer. It doesn't have to be, one or the other. It can be both. And communication, relationship building, and ongoing support are essential, not just for attracting applicants, but for retaining and empowering them. Ultimately, recruitment isn't a one-time effort. It's continuous, and with that investment, strengthening the peer-led support and advancing means meaningful family engagement. And I think, if you talk to programs that do have the family peer role, it's pretty evident that family peers can really help engagement and progress with both the youth and the families in a lot of different ways. Michelle, so there isn't a certificate for this training, but you should get an email from CTAC saying that you attended, and you can screenshot and save that to show that you attended. And I don't know if it's on the CTAC, if it's in your CTAC account or not that you attended it. So I would screenshot the email just in case.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and any of these webinars and things that you take do, do count towards that continuing education. So I do not have anything else. Oh, here's some resources. Sorry, yes, I do. I'll leave those up for a minute. And then we will share all of the slides and the video recording. Usually it takes about 2 to 3 days to show up on CTAC's website.
Do you have can you share your contact, Christy?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Put it in the chat. Yeah, don't hesitate to reach out. I love to support people, families together. That's what we do. We're helping to support agencies to successfully, find, hire, and onboard family peers and help support those family peers in their roles. So then you can also, thank you, Ashley. The FPA credential at Families Together New York State goes to the whole workforce development department. So it comes to me, it comes to Ashley, our director, our admins, and things like that. So you can also use that. Anything else that anybody who sort of wants to ask or share?
If anyone has any more questions, you can come off mute or put those in the chat, as Christy had said. And we want to thank you, Christy, for all that wonderful information and recruitment strategies for FPAs. We do have some upcoming events, which we would love for you to join us at on June 20th. From 12 p.m. to 2 p.m., we have approaches to substance use and disorder in youth and dual diagnoses. And on June 24th, from 11 to 1 p.m., we have serious emotional disturbance, or SED, review of determination and documentation. And lastly, we have strategies for recruiting youth peer advocates, and that is on June 26th from 12 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. We want to thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much. There were great questions and conversation.
Yes, thank you, Christy, for the great presentation. Thank you, everyone, for your time. As a reminder, today's recording and slides will be available on the CTAC website within the next 2 to 3 business days. Our coordinator will be sending a link in the chat box so you can complete our brief feedback survey, which you will also receive in an email in case you are unable to complete it at this time. On behalf of Families Together New York State and CTAC and Christy, we thank you for joining us today and have a great rest of your day.